Okay, we're now going to have a look at plagiarism and how CrossRef services can help you to deal with this. So what is the problem? Plagiarism. Unfortunately, it's very common unethical behaviour. Copying another person's work without attribution, and also even republishing a work without the acknowledgement of the original. It wastes the time of reviewers and editors. It fails to give the original authors any credit for the work they've done, and basically it's fraud. Now, it can be fraud because of ignorance, but it's unethical behaviour, and it's something that editors need to be very careful about. So why do we need checks? Well, there are international standards which have been set up, including from the Committee on Publication Ethics, or COPE. And there is a general understanding and a promotion of good ethical behaviour within universities, within research institutes. However, there still seems to be an increase in the amount of plagiarism that we're detecting, and a growth in duplicate publication, which is all very worrying. It's worth thinking why there's an apparent increase in plagiarism. A lot of academics are under a great deal of pressure to publish, and publish in good quality journals. Now, that's fraud, but it's fraud because of the circumstances, possibly, that the authors find themselves in. There's also an increasing number of researchers who simply have not been given suitable training. Somebody was saying to me a while ago that in India, the growth in the number of undergraduates in India over the past decade has been tremendous, a massive rise in the number of undergraduates, because the government is promoting education and raising standards by encouraging people to go to university. Now, that's great. That's really good, not only for India, but also for global education. However, one of the problems that you have with that is that they have insufficient lecturers, teachers. So you're getting a huge growth in students, but there are not enough teachers and lecturers to teach them properly. And so class sizes have increased from maybe 70 or 100 people at a lecture to maybe 500 or 600 people at a lecture. Now, with that increase, it means that the individual students are not being as monitored as carefully as they were when there were fewer students. And this lack of monitoring is causing students to simply be ignorant of some of the ethical priorities that we take for granted, because you've been through the system and you have been told what is right and what's wrong. And there are a lot of students coming out of universities that are simply unaware of this principle. There's also a misplaced respect of other people, of other work. Now, that's ignorance about the fact that you can't use it. I was telling somebody I had an exam paper submitted last year. Every answer was rubbish, apart from one that was perfect. So, of course, I Googled the answer, and the guy had copied it off Wikipedia. And when I wrote to him and said, "You failed the exam because of plagiarism," he said, "Yes, I understand, I know it was wrong, but the answer on Wikipedia was so correct, I couldn't have written it any better than Wikipedia." I had some sympathy, but he still failed his paper. And of course, part of that, and the same with this student, was the difficulties of writing in a language that is not your native tongue. And not understanding that you can't just copy phrases from people, and not understanding what is an acceptable level and what is not. And of course, one of the biggest problems is that the internet means it's much easier to copy an online work than it was to copy a printed work, because you don't have to type it, you can cut and paste. So that's just straight fraud of just copying someone's work. So we need better systems to discover plagiarism. So the solution that CrossRef provide is CrossCheck. CrossCheck started in 2006 when plagiarism really came on the headlines of all the scholarly publishers as a big problem. It started as a pilot just with 7 publishers, but was formally launched within 2 years. Currently, there's nearly 700 publishers who participate. Currently, it references over 43 million content items, and there's increasing numbers of manuscripts being uploaded each month. And there is a title and member list on the CrossRef website. Now, what makes CrossRef different than using alternatives such as a search engine? With my journal, I tend to use a search engine, but that's because the organisation that I publish it with are not a member of CrossRef. This is going to change. I'm a little bit embarrassed, but this is going to change. We will be members soon. So I use Google, and I cut and paste the text into Google, and it sort of works. The problem is, you can't paste a whole article into Google or Bing or PubMed. You can only paste a little bit. So you would have to keep cutting and pasting lots of items. You also get too many results. You get 1,000 hits rather than the one you want. And often you can get a hit, but you can't access the full text because it's behind a paywall, because it's in subscription content that you don't have access to. So you can't investigate it properly. And also, of course, you don't get any report giving you information or statistics about your checking. So search engines are sort of okay, but they're not brilliant. Now, how CrossCheck works is, to begin with, from a technical point of view, it has underneath it Authenticate software, which is from a company called iParadigm. Now, Authenticate software, even those of you who are not familiar with CrossCheck, you may recognize this because this is very widely used software for checking plagiarism. It's used by a lot of universities, particularly, and it has very clever, sophisticated matching systems underneath it. So CrossRef decided quite sensibly not to reinvent a piece of software that is already there and very well established in the market. So it's got a good reputation, it's well used, and it provides very good reports. So when you use CrossCheck, what's checked? Well, it checks the members' content. This is one particular value. So the more members that participate, obviously the better this gets. But you're checking your content against the other members of CrossRef. But of course, that's not everything. So it also checks the internet, both current and archived pages. And it also has agreements with many large databases, such as EBSCO and Gale, and it will check the content within them as well. So it's checking far more than Authenticate alone checks. And it's also checking some content that's within the dark web or the deep web that can't be checked by the major search engines. So you're getting a better broad spectrum of content being checked against. So how it works is you upload your document. It goes through the Authenticate software, which checks the web through CrossCheck and various databases, and it provides a report for each of your documents. But an important word about this, and in fact I was speaking to someone at the break about this, plagiarism is really the theft of ideas, and no plagiarism checking system is clever enough to identify an idea. What it's doing is checking text, and it's checking whether your text is similar to text published elsewhere. Now, that means that if somebody has plagiarized an idea, but has written it in completely new text, no plagiarism checking software will find it. It also means if it's translated, it's not going to find it. And it also can't check figures and tables. Alternatively, something that is detected as duplicated may not be plagiarism. You could easily have an article with extensive quotations from another work, fully referenced, perfectly ethical, no problem. But through a plagiarism checking tool, it will come up as a very high duplicated content. So these systems need to be treated with some caution, because they check for text duplication. They don't really check for plagiarism. So remember the limitations. It won't find images, graphs, tables. For maths publishers, if you're inserting your inline equations as images, it won't find them. So it won't find duplication of that or formulae. It won't find translations, and it certainly won't find ideas. And so a human being, the editor or somebody tasked with it, must always make the final check to make sure that something is truly plagiarized or is a perfectly acceptable duplication of text. So how do you use CrossCheck? You upload your document, you get a report, you investigate, you make a decision, which is all sounds lovely and easy. And it sounds so easy that I'm going to ask Rachel to come and explain exactly how it works, if that's okay. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm just going to show some screens from inside the Authenticate service that CrossCheck works with. So, one of the things, if you use the service, or even if you don't, one of the things that the system will do is it will bring back a report for you to take a look at and make a decision. One of the things that the report will do, and this is a screen from inside the Authenticate system, one of the things that the report will do is it will give you a percentage. So it will show you how much text within the manuscript you've uploaded corresponds to other text within those three databases. So as Pippa was saying, it doesn't say why that matches, and it's also just giving you an overall percent. So say I saw a match of 20%, I might think, okay, that's relatively low. So then I go in, I take a look at that match, and it could be made up of, a couple of 5% matches, which are sections of the work that the author has referenced correctly. The other side is that could be, that could be an 18% match from one source, which the author hasn't referenced, which could be just cut and pasted, as the system tells you, from another publication. So that's why it's always worth clicking on the box to go into the report and actually taking a look at why the matches are occurring. So within the reports themselves, there are some things that you can choose to exclude. So a lot of what can really make that number jump up and make papers look problematic when maybe when they're not is bibliography sections. So obviously the references in your paper are going to match the references in potentially a lot of other papers. So you can choose to exclude the bibliography and not have those references appear. Equally, you can take out small sources or matches, so little small snippets of text, or quotations as well. And also the abstract and materials and methods sections. People in some subject areas, there might be a set wording for a methods section to show that you've carried out an experiment properly. I think one of the most cited papers of all time references a methods section and how you would actually do that. So it might be that you want to just focus on the main body of the text itself, in which case you can exclude some of these factors. So this is just a quick look into the system itself. So if I click on the link to actually view one of the reports, what I'm seeing here is I'm seeing the article that I uploaded on the left with all of the figures, tables, etc. in place, so that you can see at a glance where the matches are coming from. And you can see sections of the text are highlighted in different colours, and those correspond to different matches. And then on the right-hand side of the screen, I can see in the match overview section, that's actually showing me what the matches, what those different colours and what the different sections are matched to. So you can see the top match is to site you like, so a source from the internet, and actually site you like is sort of bookmarking abstracts, etc. So, you know, chances are that they've taken it from the article rather than the other way around. You can see that there's a match to content in the CrossCheck database, so that publisher content, and also a small match to that third database of publications from people like Gale and EBSCO. So you can have a look at the text, you can see if there are references there, and you can also view the text side by side. There's also a text-only report, so this is the document viewer mode. The text-only report will show you just the text without the images, etc. included, which used to be the default way of working in the system. So if you prefer that, and you can also copy and paste from it, then you can use text-only. If I want to look in more detail at a match, then I can click on the coloured text that corresponds to one of the matches, and that will bring up a little box which will show you the text that it's matching to from the article itself. And if I click on the full source view link over to the right, then what that will do is it will show me, on the left it will show me the manuscript that I've uploaded, and then the full text of the article that it's matched to on the right hand side. And as we were saying, that's, even if you don't have a subscription to that content, it will still show you the full text. And that's something that just CrossCheck users get, because we thought it was really important for editors, for journals, to be able to establish the context of the match. The fact that it uses fuzzy matching, what that means is that it doesn't have to be word for word matches. So if I was a pretty, you know, maybe Wikipedia couldn't say it better, but maybe you want to take Wikipedia and change a few words and try to put that into your article and try to get, you know, and try to cheat the system a little bit. What you can do is you can the system will use fuzzy matching, so it's not looking for exact matches, it's looking for things like word substitutions, synonyms, etc., which can sometimes give you sort of false positives, but for the most part it does just mean that it's trying to guard against people making subtle substitutions to try to get past the system. So the two paragraphs that I have here, although they're not exactly the same, they would come up as a match in the system. So we have a committee of publishers who use CrossCheck, who give us advice, and we also survey CrossCheck member publishers to try to get an idea of when they check articles on submission, on acceptance, or maybe only whenever they have a suspicion, maybe a reviewer has said, I think I've seen this article before. And we've got publishers taking a range of these approaches. The trend is moving towards on submission, but I think from the publisher perspective, it depends on the resources that you have. For example, if you get a very, very large number of submissions and you reject a lot of submissions at a quite early stage, then maybe there's no point checking them all if you're going to do a degree of sort of checking or initial rejection at that point. So some journals have started to just check papers whenever they come in after revision, because you've invested more time and effort in the paper, but you're also making sure that actually you want to get it published, you want to check that it's okay. There is a per document checking fee that iParadigms bill. So again, if you check all revised manuscripts, then you're checking less than you would upon submission, and therefore it would cost less. But equally, by that time, you have invested more time and effort in the manuscript. So I think it's something that publishers they try out, and they just see what's the best fit for them. We don't sort of enforce anything on that. if you do use a manuscript submission system, a lot of the submission systems do have integrated the checks within them. So either doing an automatic upload to authenticate at a certain point in the process, and then showing you the report and the results from the system, or just again letting the publisher submit papers on a one-by-one basis. If you have your own submission system, Authenticate will let you integrate with them in case you're not using one of the bigger ones. What happens if you discover plagiarism? If you haven't already heard of COPE or the Committee on Publication Ethics, they put together some really very good and very well thought out flowcharts, which basically make sure that you follow things through correctly. What I mean by that, and this goes back to the earlier point this morning about, being nice to authors and encourage them to submit with your publications, but also in terms of plagiarism, and I was always warned about this when I worked at a publisher, is that you can't go and accuse someone of plagiarism. That's getting into very scary terminology. But what you want to make sure is that if you are going to, say, retract a paper on that basis, or if you want to follow up, that you make sure that you contact the correct people at the organisations, and that you word your correspondence in such a way so as you keep yourself right and you make sure that you're not going to cause any repercussions for yourself or for your journal. So these are really good, and they just make sure that that you're following the correct procedures, and it means that each individual publisher doesn't have to start from scratch and make up their own approaches. And some have adapted the COPE flowcharts and information slightly towards their own purposes. Plagiarism, it's easy. Whenever publishers sort of started to check papers, it's very easy to be quite shocked by how much they were finding. But a lot of the issues are about ignorance and about educating authors. So making sure that people know that they need to reference correctly, letting them know that, having clear citation policies. So one publisher that I spoke to recently, they had an issue with some of their senior academics because they would reference themselves, or they would use sections from their own papers in newer manuscripts, but they wouldn't make reference to the fact, or they wouldn't cite those earlier publications. So it looked like they were just trying to pass off older content as something new. But the issue was that they were saying, well, because we do double-blind peer review, if I make all of these references to myself, then people will know that I'm the author. So the publisher changed their policy to say, even if you're citing one of your own publications, you still need to put the references in so that it's really clear that this isn't new content. So instead, responding when you discover plagiarism, state the facts, let the authors know the sections of text that you're concerned about, and see if they respond. But I don't think, I've seen some quite angry emails go back and forth and accusations, and I think you just need to be really clear as to what you're trying to find out. In terms of who can use CrossCheck, any member can participate in the CrossCheck service. It is one of the services that we do charge extra for, in that there's an extra 20% of the annual CrossRef membership fee to participate, and then the charges of checking the individual articles. They start at 75 cents per article, and that goes down based on the volume of submissions that you make to the service. And then to make the best use of it, because CrossCheck has started in about 2007, 2008, it's one of the older services that CrossRef offers. So as such, we've been trying to build a bit of a community around the service, because the people at the publishers who are using it every day are the ones that give me the best feedback on what needs to go into the service, what problems they're seeing, and also the policies that they've set up around it. So we've just done a session at a Council of Science Editors meeting in the US, but we also do sessions in and around our CrossRef annual meetings. We do webinars, so we're doing one next week for CrossRef administrators, and there's a mailing list, and as I said, we do surveys every 18 months or so to get an idea of how people are using the system and what kind of things they're finding whenever they do so. One of the ways, just to finish, that publishers are making use of CrossCheck is they're showing on their submission pages, they're showing on their journal websites, and inside their submission systems, they're putting a note or an announcement to say, hi, we use CrossCheck. And what that can do is that can let authors who are aware know that their paper will be screened for originality, or has the chance to be screened whenever they submit to the journal. And from the publishers that I've been speaking to, they find when they've started to use the service, they find quite high levels of potential plagiarism, copy and paste, text recycling, so people reusing their own text without reference, and advertising that they're using the service and starting to use it seems to start to cut down on that, because it means that you can use it to educate your authors and make sure that they're submitting and that they're following the best citation practices and the best publication practices.